There's a crisis in Canada that you can't see from the street. You can see the empty storefronts, you can see the for sale signs, the closed factories, the cold homes. But this one is hidden, behind closed doors, inside bank statements, buried in the quiet arithmetic of millions of ordinary households. And it might be the most dangerous one of all. Canadians are drowning in debt, not a few reckless people, not the irresponsible minority everyone likes to imagine. Ordinary families, working people, careful people, quietly carrying more debt than they've ever carried, using credit not to buy luxuries but to survive, borrowing to cover groceries, borrowing to cover the gap between what they earn and what life costs, falling a little further behind every month, and covering the difference with money that isn't theirs. And here's why this is the video that ties everything on this channel together. Because all the crises we've documented, the unaffordable housing, the stagnant wages, the impossible groceries, the heating bills, they don't just make life hard, they leave a gap every single month between what people bring in and what they have to spend. And that gap has to be filled with something. For millions of Canadians, it's being filled with debt. Stay with me, because once you understand this, you'll understand what's really holding the whole country together and why it can't hold forever. Let's be clear about what kind of debt we're talking about, because it matters enormously. There's a healthy kind of debt, borrowing to invest in something that builds your future. A mortgage on a home, a loan for an education or a business. That's using debt as a tool, and it can be perfectly reasonable. That's not what this video is about. This video is about the other kind, the debt people take on just to keep their heads above water. Credit cards used for groceries and gas. Lines of credit drawn down to cover the rent. Loans taken to pay off other loans. Buy now, pay later on everyday essentials. This isn't borrowing to get ahead. It's borrowing to not fall behind, using tomorrow's money to survive today. Because today's money isn't enough. And that distinction is everything. Because survival debt is a warning sign, not a lifestyle choice. When people borrow to invest, the economy is healthy. When people borrow to eat, the economy is failing them. The rise of survival debt across Canada isn't a story about people being bad with money. It's a story about an economy where, for millions of people, the money simply doesn't cover the basics anymore. So they borrow the difference, and the debt piles up, quietly, behind every ordinary front door. So why is the debt piling up? The first reason is the simplest, and it's the thesis of this whole channel made visible. Debt is filling the gap between wages and the cost of living. We've traced that gap in every video. Wages that crawled while costs sprinted. Housing that ate an impossible share of income. Groceries, insurance, heating, all climbing. And the result, for a huge number of households, is a monthly shortfall. More money going out than coming in. The math doesn't balance. And when the math doesn't balance, month after month, there are only so many things you can do. You can cut, and people have cut everything they can, as we've documented. But there's a floor below which you can't cut. You still have to eat, still have to keep the lights on, still have to get to work. So when you've cut everything cuttable and the math still doesn't balance, the only thing left is to borrow the difference, to put the groceries on the card, to draw down the line of credit for the rent, to cover the gap with debt, because there's nothing else left to cover it with. That's the mechanism. Debt is the shock absorber, just like food was. But where cutting food is a physical sacrifice, debt is a financial one that piles up invisibly and compounds. The debt isn't a sign that people are living beyond their means. It's a sign that their means no longer cover a basic life, and they're borrowing to make up a difference they didn't create. The debt is the exact size of the gap between the life people were promised and the life their income can actually buy. The second reason is what makes debt so uniquely dangerous. It feeds on itself. Here's the trap. When you borrow to cover a shortfall, that debt now costs you money, interest. And with interest rates high, as we've covered, that cost is significant. So next month, you don't just have your original shortfall to cover, you also have the interest on last month's borrowing. Your expenses just went up, because now you're paying to service the debt you took on to survive, which means the gap gets bigger, which means you borrow more, which means the interest gets bigger. and around it goes. This is the debt spiral, and it's brutal precisely because it accelerates. It starts small, a little borrowing to cover a tight month. But the interest compounds, the balances grow, and soon a frightening share of a household's income is going just to service debt, not to pay it off, just to pay the interest and keep it from growing. People end up making minimum payments that barely dent the balance, running to stand still, watching the debt grow despite everything they pay toward it. And here's the cruelest part. The people most likely to fall into this trap are the ones with the least, because they're the ones with the shortfall in the first place, and they're the ones who get charged the highest interest rates on the riskiest credit. So the debt trap hits hardest exactly where people can least afford it, charging the most to those with the least and pulling them under faster the more they struggle. It's a current that gets stronger the more you fight it. The third reason is that the debt was made easy. The system handed people the rope to hang on with and to hang themselves with. Think about how available credit has become. Credit cards offered constantly, lines of credit extended, buy now, pay later options at every checkout, splitting even small everyday purchases into installments. Borrowing has been made frictionless, normal, even encouraged, woven into ordinary shopping so smoothly that going into debt for everyday things barely feels like borrowing anymore. Now, in one sense, this is a lifeline. When you're facing a shortfall you can't cover, easy credit is the thing that keeps the lights on and food on the table this month. It genuinely stops an immediate crisis. But it's a lifeline that becomes a leash. Because the same easy access that helps you survive this month is what lets the debt build to dangerous levels over time. The system made it effortless to cover today's gap with tomorrow's money. And effortless is exactly how people end up in over their heads. So there's a quiet trap in the whole arrangement. An economy that doesn't pay people enough to live is paired with a financial system that makes it incredibly easy to borrow the difference. And that combination doesn't fix the underlying problem. It hides it, for a while, by letting people paper over the gap with credit. The debt makes the crisis invisible, right up until the moment the debt itself becomes the crisis. The rope that helps you hold on is the same rope that's slowly tightening. But here's the real reason Canadians are drowning in debt, the shocking one that ties this whole channel together. The debt is how a broken economy hides its own failure. Canadians are borrowing against their future to survive a present that their income can no longer afford. Step back and see the whole picture. This channel has documented, video by video, that ordinary Canadian life has become unaffordable, that wages don't cover the cost of housing, food, transport, energy, and the basics. That's a fundamental failure of an economy. When working people can't afford to live on what they earn, something is deeply broken. And debt is what's been hiding that failure. Because as long as people can borrow to cover the gap, the failure doesn't fully show. Life looks like it's continuing normally. People are still in their homes, still buying groceries, still getting by. But underneath that normal-looking surface, they're doing it on borrowed money, quietly mortgaging their futures to maintain a present their incomes can't support. The debt is the difference between how things look and how things actually are. It's the crisis, financed. That's the shock, and it reframes everything. The mountain of household debt in this country isn't a story about individual irresponsibility. It's the measure of how far ordinary life has drifted out of reach of ordinary incomes. Every dollar of survival debt is a dollar the economy failed to provide in wages, borrowed from the future to fill a hole in the present. Canadians aren't overspending. They're being forced to borrow to live, because the alternative is going without the basics. And a whole country quietly surviving on borrowed money, papering over the gap between what people earn and what life costs, is a country living on borrowed time. Because debt borrowed against the future has to be repaid in the future. And a generation using tomorrow's money to survive today is a generation with no tomorrow left to spend. The bill is still coming. It's just been postponed, and it's growing while it waits. Let me make it real. Picture a working family doing everything right, both parents employed, careful with money, not extravagant. And every month, after the rent and the bills and the groceries, the math comes up short. Not because they wasted anything, Because their income genuinely doesn't cover a basic life anymore. So they cover the gap the only way they can, a little more on the credit card, a little more drawn from the line of credit, just to get through the month. And then next month it happens again, and the month after that, and slowly the balances climb, the minimum payments grow. A bigger and bigger slice of their paycheck goes just to servicing the debt, money that buys them nothing, that just holds back the tide. They're working full-time, doing everything they were told to do, and they're going backwards, running as fast as they can just to stand still. And underneath it all is the stress, a specific, grinding, sleepless kind of stress. The dread of opening the statement, the mental math at every checkout, the fear of what happens if one thing goes wrong, a car repair, a lost shift, a sick child, because there's no room left, no savings, nothing but more debt to fall back on. They're one bad month away from the whole thing coming apart, and they know it, and they carry that knowledge every single day. That's the human reality behind the debt numbers. Not reckless spenders, exhausted, careful people, borrowing to survive, trapped on a treadmill that speeds up the harder they run. And to anyone watching who's living this, it is not a personal failure. You were handed a math problem with no solution and told it was your fault for not solving it. It isn't. And you're far from alone. There are nonprofit credit counseling services in most areas, and reaching out to them is a sign of strength, not shame. And this doesn't stay behind those closed doors. It threatens the whole country. First, there's the fragility. A population buried in debt is a fragile population, with no savings, no cushion, and no room to absorb a shock. When households are borrowed to the limit just to survive, any disruption, a downturn, a job loss, a rise in costs, can push huge numbers of people over the edge all at once. A country running on survival debt has no resilience left. Nothing else is as important. It's an economy balanced on a knife's edge, one bad turn from a cascade of defaults. Second, there's the drag on everything. Money spent servicing debt is money not spent on anything else. Not on goods, not on the local economy, not on saving or investing in the future. So a heavily indebted population is a weaker economy overall, with people funneling their income to interest instead of into their lives. The debt doesn't just hurt the borrower, it quietly drains the whole system. And third, there's the reckoning that's being postponed. Debt lets you delay a crisis, but it doesn't cancel it. It moves it into the future and adds interest. So all this survival borrowing is building toward a reckoning, a moment when the debt can't grow any further, when the borrowing stops working, when the gap can no longer be papered over. Nobody knows exactly when, but an economy that's been hiding its failure with debt eventually has to face the failure, and the longer it's postponed, the bigger it gets. And this is where debt reveals itself as the hidden layer under everything on this channel. Every crisis we've covered has a debt shadow. The unaffordable homes, bought with mortgages stretched to the limit. The impossible cars, financed with loans people can't really carry. The gap between wages and the cost of living, filled, month after month, with credit. Debt is the invisible thread running through all of it, the thing that let people keep participating in a life they could no longer actually afford. It's how the crisis stayed hidden for so long, because debt let people keep up appearances while the ground gave way beneath them. That's the deepest truth here. The affordability crisis and the debt crisis are the same crisis, seen from two angles. The affordability crisis is the gap between what life costs and what people earn. The debt crisis is that same gap, filled with borrowed money. One is the disease, the other is the painkiller that's slowly becoming its own disease. And a country that's been medicating an affordability crisis with debt has not solved anything. It's just delayed the reckoning and added interest to the bill. So when you look at that mountain of Canadian household debt, understand what you're really seeing. It's not a nation of spendthrifts. It's the price tag of everything this channel has documented. The total, borrowed cost of trying to live an ordinary life in a country where ordinary life stopped being affordable. It's the crisis, quantified and carried on the backs of ordinary people who did nothing wrong except need to survive. So where does this go? For individuals, there are real steps. Nonprofit credit counseling. consolidating high-interest debt, seeking help early rather than hiding from it. That genuinely isn't financial advice, just the sensible pattern. And reaching out for help is the opposite of failure. But the honest truth is the one this whole channel keeps arriving at. You cannot budget your way out of a gap that your income doesn't cover. If the fundamental problem is that wages don't meet the cost of a basic life, then debt isn't a personal failing to fix. It's a structural hole that keeps refilling no matter how hard people bail. The real fix is the same as always: wages that cover the cost of living, so people don't have to borrow to survive. Housing and essentials people can actually afford, so the monthly gap closes. Take away the gap, and the survival debt stops growing on its own, because nobody borrows to eat when their paycheck already feeds them. The debt is a symptom. The disease is an economy that stopped paying its people enough to live. Which leaves the question this channel keeps arriving at, now at the hidden heart of it all. What happens to a country when its own people can only afford to live by borrowing against a future they may never be able to repay? So I want to hear from you, and honestly, this one takes courage to answer. Have you had to take on debt just to cover the basics? And how does it feel to carry it? Do you feel like you're running to stand still? And do you think this is a personal problem or a sign of something much bigger? Tell me in the comments below, and there's no judgment here, because this is happening to millions of people who did everything right. If you're struggling, please reach out to a non-profit credit counselor. That's what they're there for. I read every comment. And if you want honest, clear-eyed breakdowns of the forces reshaping life across Canada, subscribe to Canada Insider. There's a lot more of this story to tell.